Hey everyone, welcome in, welcome in. All right, everyone, we are going to get started in about 2 minutes, just letting everyone inside of the room welcome in everyone. Thank you for attending. All right, everyone, we're gonna go ahead and get started as folks are still entering. Um, Good afternoon, and thank you all for attending, and welcome to the Youth-Led Advocacy Guide launch party. So excited that everyone is here. You can drop in your name, your location in the chat so everyone can just say hi. All right, I see some introductions going in the chat. I'm gonna start by just saying I am Amaris Ramey. I'm the grassroots organizing manager here at Mentor National, and I am currently in New York City. Okay. Nice to see everyone coming in from different places. All right, so while everyone is joining in, we're gonna go ahead and go over the agenda for today while folks continue to come in the room. All right, so we are going to start off with some opening remarks, and then we're gonna continue off to our welcome and icebreaker. We'll be playing a youth advocacy video that was just released today for you all to have a look at that. We're gonna go over a couple of things about the guide, talk about the goal of the guide, the purpose, how it was created, how it came to be. And then we are going to have two extraordinary panels today. We are going to hear from some folks who work directly on the production of the guide, and also from some mentor affiliates who have been doing some wonderful youth advocacy work. And then we're going to open it up for some Q&A. And then we are going to have a couple of closing remarks today. So we're going to go ahead and start with our icebreaker question. Just kidding. We're actually going to start by thanking our funder. So we wanted to start by just thanking our funder, the City Foundation. The City Foundation is the foundation who has funded this youth-led advocacy project, the guide, as well as our youth advocacy magazine that we created. So we want to thank City for believing in mentoring as a tool for a more equitable and just world, and for supporting this work. Neither the guide nor the magazine would be possible without their generous investment. So we just want to take a minute to thank them for funding this project. And so now we're going to move on to our icebreaker. So for this icebreaker, I would love for everyone to type in the chat, if you could have one superpower, what would that be? So I'll give folks a minute to answer in the chat. If I had a superpower, it would probably be to be invisible. All right, I see teleportation, communicate with anyone, including and especially my dog. I love that one. I would love to communicate with my cat to see what she thinks about every day. Telekinesis, infinite energy. I love that one. Healing powers, that's a good one. Photographic memory. Psychic powers, be able to fly. I see a lot of teleportation. Seems like a lot of people want to get to some places quickly. All right, these are some really great answers. So my favorite question to ask folks is what their superpower would be if they had one, because I believe that advocacy is everyone's superpower. And so today, as we continue through this presentation, you're going to learn about how you can use advocacy, and specifically how youth advocacy can really be a superpower. All right, so thank you all for participating in this. We're gonna go ahead and go to the next thing, which is our youth advocacy video. So we're gonna share our screen and watch this video. Youth voice is really important because making noise is how we make sure that folks know that something needs to be heard, that there's some urgency behind that noise.
Making the conscious decision to wake up every day and say, okay, these are the changes I want to see made, and this is how I'm going to make those changes.
A lot of times young people do not lack the capabilities, they just often lack the access to those resources to really speak for themselves. We have to be able to redistribute that power back to them so that they can have that authority and agency to speak up about things that directly impact them.
Am I putting myself back into a 17-year-old's shoes, looking at what's going on today and saying, is this enough? They're willing to soak up that information, they're willing to soak up that knowledge if it is truly nurtured, if it's truly supported.
When we advocate for young people, we are using skills and tactics that we've developed as advocates, but also allowing them to use their personal experiences.
Just gotten to work with so many amazing, inspiring activists. There are just so many things I learned from more of the technical aspects of things, what researching looks like, what language to use when talking with legislators, but then also kind of the softer skills.
When you see someone that you don't know, when you see a youth movement that you're not familiar with, and you're willing to acknowledge that effort, when you're willing to acknowledge the accomplishments, acknowledge their vision and what they're trying to do, it's very powerful.
So just joining us in that attitude of positivity and genuinely believing in us that, yes, we can, using our power as youth, make the changes we want to see.
Right, I don't know about y'all, but that was so inspiring. I know that I'm a part of the video too, but I was specifically talking about the youth and the affiliate who spoke on it. It was really inspiring. This is my first time really looking at it with a lot of people in the room. So thank you all for watching. So we hope that that video really just gets you really hyped up on youth advocacy and excited about what youth advocacy can look like when you have some really great skills developed from the resource that we just released today. Okay, so we can go to the next slide. So I wanted to start by giving an overview of the Youth-Led Advocacy Guide. So the guide really compiles the best practices, tools, and insights to serve as a resource for youth advocacy. It amplifies the voices of youth activists. It equips programs with skills to implement authentic youth-led organizing activities and programs, showcases local and national stories of youth advocacy through diverse media, and inspires mobilization and support emerging community leaders. Now, these are all wonderful and fantastic things that the guide does, but being in this space today is really going to give us the opportunity to understand how the guide was even formed and really, get an overview of how Mentor used youth voice and youth input to create this youth-led advocacy guide. So the guide was designed to be a practical tool for youth mentoring programs, but the guide is also designed to really help youth serving organizations, to help adults, funders, teachers, mentors, really just help current and aspiring youth advocates who are really looking to establish or expand some effective youth-led advocacy activities and initiatives. So the guide came together by using the vision and expertise of a team of youth advocates, committee members, and staff from Mentor affiliates and from Mentor National. And so the theme of power is what runs throughout the youth-led advocacy guide. So in some of the initial meetings that we had, when there was a group of young people on an advisory committee, a group of affiliates, and then a group of Mentor National staff, we came together and met every 2 weeks on a Wednesday. And so, we spent a lot of time brainstorming on what the guide could really center. Was there going to be a theme of the guide? Was there a story that we were going to follow? And so, when we added in the Youth Advisory Committee, one thing that really struck a chord with everyone was the theme of power. And so, when we initially had these conversations, we asked ourselves, well, how can we really make an entire guide that centers around power? And the youth activists can most definitely attest to this. They had a lot of things to say on how power really influences youth-led movements and youth advocacy in general. So, as we continue on in this presentation, we are going to hear from some folks who work directly on the guide as they talk about, what power does, how it plays into the work that they've been doing, and we can really get some more insight as to how the guide was created. So with that being said, I am going to start panel one. Panel one features Sarah Schaefer, Maite Nazario, and Jenna Kane, and each of them will take a moment to introduce themselves. They played a significant role in creating this guide. Sarah was on the advisory committee for the affiliates of the guide. Maite designed the guide, and Jenna was on the advisory committee, the youth advisory committee for the guide. So we're really excited to hear from them.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sarah Schaefer. I'm the Executive Director of Mentor Minnesota, and I am so honored to join you here today because I am both a mentor and a lifelong mentee, and I'm a civic engagement hobbyist. So when I was asked to join this committee, this work group, I was just so excited, and I'm really looking forward to sharing a little bit more about my experience and how we got here to this day of the launch party, because this is a pretty momentous day for us, and I appreciate you all joining.
All right, everyone, we're having a little bit of difficulties with folks being able to show their video on the screen. So just give us about 2 minutes. All right, perfect. I think we have fixed the problem. All right, so Sarah, thank you for that wonderful introduction of who you are. Jenna, if you could go ahead and take the stage and just give an introduction of yourself.
Of course. Hi, my name is Jenna Kane, and I, as Amaris mentioned, was on the Youth Advisory Committee for creating this guide. I've worked for the past 3 years with the Sunrise Movement, which is a youth-led movement fighting to end climate change through a just energy transition. And I use that experience with the Sunrise Movement to help reflect in making this guide on the committee.
Perfect. And Maite, we're still working on getting your camera going, but if you could just give a quick overview of yourself too, that would be fantastic.
Hey everyone, my name is Maite Nazario. My pronouns are they, them, and I have been working in advocacy since I was 19, creating murals and public street art, and also as a graphic designer and just designer in general. And I have worked on this guide, illustrating and designing the whole thing, and it has been a true pleasure to craft this guide, and I love the message that stands behind it. Super excited to go over it today.
Thank you, Maite. All right, so Sarah, I'm going to ask you the first question, which is, how was youth voice incorporated into this guide?
I mean, it's in some ways it's hard for me to answer that as the adult in this space. However, I really feel like we integrated youth voice at all levels of this process. And the way we started even the conception of the overall guide itself was through a lot of curiosity. There were early conversations in which we paused and looked at each other and said, like, okay, we keep saying youth-led, but what does youth mean? We keep saying advocacy, but what does advocacy actually mean? What does it accomplish? And who's actually supposed to answer that? Because when we're talking about the outcomes of advocacy, that's not something we as the adults, the older adults in the room, really should be answering. So it almost like as we started this, we came up with all of these questions that we really wanted to help, we wanted answered, and we wanted help answering by the young people in the room. And then very shortly thereafter, we had the real joy of reaching back into our own communities. So here in Minnesota, recruiting young leaders who were really also interested in this and would be willing to share their expertise with us. So we in Minnesota had 3, one of whom was actually my mentee and is a really dear friend of mine, Tatiana, which was just a lovely experience. So I really feel like young people were at the center of this, and truly after we had this committee together, the I don't even know what to call us, the advisors on this committee really stepped back and just became the cheerleaders, the listeners, the ones who could provide feedback. But we really took a back seat, and that was really fun to do.
Thank you, Sarah. Jenna, how did you see youth voice incorporated in the guide as a young person yourself, but also as a young person on the advisory committee?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to reiterate a bit of what Sarah said. Just the existence of the role of being a member of the Youth Advisory Committee alone just shows how committed the guide is to amplifying youth voices. So as a member of the committee, I worked with fellow youth activists from around the country to discuss everything from themes for the guide, which we decided on power, artwork that reflects the guide's mission, and topics that we felt were most important to touch on in the guide. I certainly found my participation in this project to be a great way to learn more about advocacy through reflection and discussion with my peers. And I know the passion and gratitude fostered during our time together are definitely reflected in the guide.
Thank you, Jenna. And Maite, could you give us some insight to how you saw youth voice being incorporated as a guide as you were designing it? Maite, you're on mute.
Sorry. The guide was created with the purpose of having youth at the forefront and considering youth voices and youth perspectives. And while I was designing the guide, I was inspired by the stories of bravery and resistance that are illustrated in the guide and the narrative of the guide, because there's a lot of examples, historical examples of how youth have shown up in a very powerful way to change narratives and just to change how power is used in the world. And the PDF dives deep into the complicated topic of youth power, and it helps both youth and adults alike start conversations about the importance of young people holding power in our society.
Thank you, Maite. Sarah, I am going to take it back to you. So you served as a member of the Affiliate Advisory Committee. You have also onboarded the committee with a very informed lens as the Executive Director of Mentor Minnesota. So how did you balance sharing your experiences while also redistributing power and space to the young people who were on the committee?
Yeah, thanks, Amaris. I really loved this question. And I think even going into this, I really did a lot of reflection about my own experience being a youth advocate, and what I would have really needed when I was 16 or 20, in order to find and utilize my own power. And so I was thinking back to, as a child, I grew up going to like anti-war protests with my parents. And even though that's something that I really cared about and I still care about, it wasn't something that I really understood fully. And I didn't really understand the power of advocacy until probably truly when I was in college. Came out as queer, started to do a lot of campus organizing around the police presence on our campus and like how we could change that to be one that was more open and affirming for all genders, all people on my women's college campus. And I realized through that, when I was thinking back to my own history, I was just really struck by how important having a strong community that was like me, that experienced the same things I did, that were, finding both disparate and similar resources like research, art, different resources that could help us message what we were talking about. This was also around the same time that Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed, and my home state of Maine had just struck down gay marriage amendments. And so it was the first time that it felt really personal to me. And I realized that in helping other young people do this, we really needed to get out of the way, because I really needed to feel this power for myself and have it be a really personal experience. And so coming into this, I am an executive director, but I'm also someone who's really curious, and I like knowing all sorts of ideas and thoughts on any given topic. And so I used my role to help facilitate those resources, to ask those questions that I knew might have been blind spots when I was younger. And of course, then also, we work in youth safety. So there were certain components that I knew we wanted to include on that, like internet safety and how to fan the flames of adult interaction or adult support of young activists. But it was a really fun project. And I hope that this is a resource that both other executive directors, program leaders, teachers will be able to utilize in a way that's super both plug and play, like they're designed to be one pagers or really bite-sized components of information that you can utilize right away, but also a really clear pathway of, you don't, as adults in the space, you don't have to tell people what to do. You can create a really positive environment where that sort of change might happen, where young people might start questioning for themselves or connecting to themselves about what's important. So that's a long answer for you, Amaris, but to do this, it really required a lot of self-reflection, and I hope that other adults who are going to be utilizing this will go through a similar process, thinking about what mattered to them and how they can connect those lessons to their work with the young people that they serve.
Thank you, Sarah. That was such a beautiful answer. Love that. Maite, I want to ask you, since you were designing the guide and you created all of the illustrations, how did you use youth voice yourself as a young person designing the guide through your illustrations?
So for me, I was very excited once I got the script for the guide and I got to reading it and really getting to know the content myself. And as a young person who has been in activism like my whole life since I can remember, and who has struggled like being taken seriously and being respected, specifically because of my age, I get questioned because of my age as if my work ethic couldn't match up, or a lot of other reasons why people underestimate youth. Getting familiarized with all the like historical context of youth power, and also reading a lot about how youth can be empowered by others and how we can empower ourselves, I think was really amazing and inspired me to create illustrations based on that content. And it made me want to create illustrations that made the PDF very connective and felt like storytelling that people could get through and empathize with, because I think it's super important that youth get highlighted in the ways that we have always been there when change is getting made in the world.
Thank you, Maite. That was such a great answer. When we put out the call for the graphic designer, we had an interview with Maite, and they sent an email that same day with a rough sketch of what the cover of the guide could possibly be. And everyone at the Youth Advisory Committee, the Affiliate Advisory Committee at National, we were like, okay, this makes so much sense. So we really saw how Maite used youth voice throughout the guide as a young person and a young activist themselves. So Jenna, the question that I want to ask you is, what does youth advocacy mean to you, and how did your experiences as a youth activist help inform your role on the advisory committee?
Yeah, so for as long as I can remember, I've taken an interest in politics and social justice. But my real journey in advocacy started when I was around 15 by joining the Sunrise Movement. Through Sunrise, I've advocated for climate legislation on the local and state levels by meeting with my representatives, testifying at public hearings, and my favorite, rallying. I've also volunteered for local and congressional campaigns along the way for candidates that I've supported who were big on climate change issues. So I feel like my advocacy has played such a big role in shaping who I am today. It helped me find my voice even when I was the youngest person in the room, and taught me integral leadership skills. When I heard about the opportunity to share what I learned with other young people interested in finding their voice, I was so excited. I eagerly brought these experiences to the table when discussing the guide with my peers. And I know just as a whole, we intended for the guide to express the skills and the knowledge that we found most helpful in our advocacy.
Thank you, Jenna. That was a beautiful answer. Jenna was the youngest person on the Youth Advisory Committee, and came with so much experience and so many wonderful things to say, and has written some really fantastic pieces for Mentor, and has really just been a great advocate for election work and organizing work. Thank you all for answering those questions. It was very informative, very great to hear from you all. And very excited to finally be able to see all of the work that you put in into a finalized product. So now we are going to move over to panel 2.
Hi, everyone. My name is Caden Fabi. I'm the policy director with Mentor National. Great to be here with you all today. I'm going to invite my star affiliates to come on camera and join me. I'm really excited for the second panel because, as Amaris noted earlier, we really designed this guide to be practical and for it to be something that you can take back and to use with your programs and with the young people that you work with. You'll see throughout the guide, once we drop the link, that there's different sections of it that allow you to read about the content and then dig in a little bit deeper and research and then reflect on it, think about how it applies to your life. And then most importantly, to act. And what's great about this panel is that we're going to be focusing on that act part and how each of our affiliates have been working directly with young people to encourage youth advocacy within their communities. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. I'm just going to ask each of you to introduce yourselves briefly before we hop into some questions. And so I'll turn it over to Thomas to go first since you're off mute. And then we'll go to Betty and then to Nate.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Thomas Owens, Executive Director of Mentor Newark in Newark, New Jersey. We came to this space really out of a necessity. As we looked at how do we recreate our programs here in Newark, we realized that a lot of things have been created with a real adult voice and an adult mindset, and we wanted to find a way that we could bring young people into this, but bring them in a way that's authentic and not just something. We realize a lot of times what we do is we bring people in, we pick a couple of kids that you like, that you get along with, and you put them on a panel so they'll agree with you, as opposed to really giving young people an authentic voice. So once we did that and the process began, it's been exciting, and it's been something that's taught me a lot about my own work. So.
Hey everyone, Betty Hill, Mentor Greater Milwaukee. I am over our youth development and partnerships, and we just kind of tapped into youth voice, just looking at the things that our youth were experiencing in the city of Milwaukee. And as we host convenings and opportunities for mentor programs and community partners to come together and find solutions, we noticed that youth weren't at the table. So that was kind of our driving force on how can we engage youth voice, have them be a part of the solutions that we as adults say that they need. And we found a lot of times that we probably need to reroute some things. So I'm excited to be on the panel and address some of the questions that we have today.
Awesome. How's everybody doing? My name is Nate Sims. I'm the Director for Government Relations and Public Policy at Mass Mentoring Partnership, based out of Boston. I'm a registered lobbyist with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts through the Secretary of State's office. And in terms of how it is that we were able to really elevate and encourage youth voice, is that understanding the approach towards what we choose to file as legislation or support as different variety of bills, it was essential to have the youth voice at the table. There's a quote that I hear a lot of officials use, which is "nothing about us without us is for us." And so in order to properly inform ourselves and make sure that the initiatives that we chose to pursue were really reflective of the youth and representing their actual needs, it was essential to really get their voice and to have them be part of the planning process and to really guide a lot of our public policy approaches on the state legislative level.
Thanks so much, everyone, for those introductions. And I think I'm sure I'm not speaking out of turn by saying that a lot of the attendees on this call today have the exact same mindset, right? There's recognition there that youth need to be included in youth-led advocacy experiences and activities. So really excited to dig in now, hear more about how you've been able to do that. So the first question that I have, and just feel free to pop in here whenever you feel inclined to, is what powers and privileges do adults have over youth? And how can adults redistribute some of those powers to young people?
I'd say that automatically adults have a seat at the table. A lot of times we're the ones making the rules. We're the ones who have the connections. We're the ones who have the networks. I think about how it is here in the city of Milwaukee. Well, we all know relationships are important to get things done, but we are unfortunately siloed a lot in this city. And so when you are the who's who, or you have a little bit of leverage, you're able to push a bit of that power. And I believe that adults can redistribute this by inviting youth to the table. We have Youth Common Council here in the city of Milwaukee, which is important as we make policy in the city of Milwaukee. But when it comes to even our school board, making sure there's youth presence there as we make decisions for our public schools that are kind of struggling right now, and making sure that we create spaces when we have our community meetings and we're making decisions, even when it comes to our neighborhoods or recreation, that we redistribute some of that power and allow youth to voice to be heard at the table.
Yeah, very, very similar sentiments as Betty as well, in terms of, what it is that we have in terms of powers and privileges. I think of knowledge, I think of resources, I think of experience. Knowledge in terms of the technical knowledge, right? Certifications, having gone through schools, attended different trainings. I think about the resources in terms of money, time, networking, and also in terms of experience, which is just having been a youth, having gone through the process of being involved with different organizations, and then now being able to translate that to working in the professional field. And when I think about how it is that we can really redistribute some of those things to young people is when we think about some of the things that we take for granted as part of just the process of getting ready or preparing organizations or presentations, right? Allow some of the youth the chance to step up. If you're working on curriculum, if you're working on presentations, if you're actually leading a discussion, and being able to have them express their interests in those potential areas by creating that space for them to be involved gives them the opportunity to see what it's actually like and do something that they actually have an interest in. Whereas we might just kind of take that for granted, like, yeah, we've done presentations, we've done these things. But, when you're 16 years old or 18 years old, a lot of those things are still new to you. And being able to know that there's a chance where we can open up that experience and we don't always have to be the one to do every single moving part is a way that we're also able to relinquish some of that power and empower them in the same process as well.
Yeah, I think one of the things that always stands out for me is the narrative around youth-led voice, rather than youth voice piece. Adults kind of we walk into a situation like, I know what's best. I know which way to lead. I know that, and I'm going to mentor you in how to do that. And I think that assumption is one of the issues that is one that holds us back the most. So like, for example, we worked with one organization, the idea that the young person is the mentee and the older person is the mentor. It's like, who said that? So we looked at a program where we were going to match police officers with young men in the neighborhood, but we flipped it and we said now, basically the young men are the mentors and the police officers are the mentees. So what it does, it automatically made a flip that said, now you need to know about me and about my life. Whereas opposed to if I'm the mentor, the mindset is as a mentor, I'm here to teach you about my life. What if the young person's the mentor? Then they take that older person into their neighborhood and they begin to see it from a young person's eye. I think that's one way that we can redistribute it, is kind of change the narrative a little bit. And maybe sometimes let us become the mentees and let them lead in a real way.
Yeah, what a thoughtful approach, I think, for for doing this type of work. Just such a really great example. Thanks for sharing that, Thomas. Next question, would love to just hear a little bit more specifically about how each of your organizations have encouraged youth voice and how you've seen other mentoring programs encourage youth voice in your community as well. Whoever wants to start.
Thomas, you got that?
I'll jump in. I'm excited about that one. So one thing we did last year is we realized that in order to do any of this work, we have to have authentic youth voice. So one thing we didn't want to do was just select a bunch of kids and say, okay, you guys are going to be the youth voice, without giving them, as someone said earlier, the training, the experience on how to do that. So what we launched last October was an academy for 2 high schools in Newark, when we developed a youth advisory council. And these young people went through a training for October through December. And then in January, when it came to the MentorCon and the Mentor Summit in DC, those young people were the advocates for Capitol Hill. So Capitol Hill Day, they were the advocates. We just went with them. They did all the talking. They spoke to the officials about what their needs were, right? And now what's going on with them, when they came back, they did some more training. And now we're in a peer-to-peer mode, where next semester, those young people are going to take this youth advisory council they developed at their 2 schools, and they're going to teach the kids in the other schools. So it's not my team teaching, it's going to be peer-to-peer teaching. And the goal is to do 2 more schools. And eventually, my long-term goal is that we have a mentoring youth advisory council in every high school in the district. And then we pull down from those groups and form a youth advisory board that will be a complementary board to our executive board. So we thought about giving a young person a seat on the board, but we realized when we really dug into that and talked to young people, if I've got 10 people on my board with 10 adults and I put 1 young person in, what am I doing? So why don't we give them an entire board? where they can really have their voice, and that's also have their voice so they can complement each other and work with each other. So that's our goal. We're looking at this project being about a 2-3 year project. At the end of the day, every high school will have a youth advisory council, and then myself and our team will be able to meet with them once a month or once every other month to find out, hey, is the mentoring that's going on in the schools working? Let me hear from you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no. Oh, wait, no, go ahead, Betty.
I'll be quick because much of what Thomas shared was pretty much kind of how Mentor Greater Milwaukee have been moving a bit. We have our youth council, and then the idea of having at least 2 to 3 youth on our board, so they're not viewed as like token youth. We're also very aware of, you have your youth who are probably considered stellar, or they're always doing something, which is good. We award that, but there's also youth who are kind of figuring out. So we want to make sure that we reach for those too. And the youth that we work with are phenomenal. Like, they are champions of their peers. We have provided peer-to-peer mentoring to equip them over the summer. For the last 2 summers, we have a youth ambassador program. Our youth interns come alongside Linnell and I. And not only do we provide them with peer-to-peer training, mentor training, but then they go and they mentor at the Boys and Girls Clubs. They also learn about youth organizing, grassroots organizing, social justice, social movement, so that they can make impact not only in their communities, but within their schools. It's a hot topic right now with the school lunches, something as simple as that, how to organize around that to get your voice, make sure your voice is heard and you get the nutrition that you need while you're at school. There was unfortunately an uptick in youth gun violence, and youth rallied around one another, and we held a community meeting. Everyone from politicians to police officers to community members to churches showed up at that event, and our youth led that. I know a lot of times we say youth voice, youth led, but they met. We had working sessions. They met, they planned the topics, the things they wanted to discuss. Recreation was a really big topic. A lot of our inner city do not have the sky zones, the trampoline parks, or the skating parks, or roller skating, or even the basketball courts are tattered. Like, they don't have that in the inner city. You have to go far out in the suburbs, and then you deal with police interaction. You deal with things that are, now I don't want to go far out. So how do we provoke change to get what we need in the city? Who do we bring? Who do we talk to? How do we get access? And that goes back to redistribute that power to make sure that our youth are learning how to, what processes are necessary to get what they need. So Mentor Greater Milwaukee has just really been a champion in not only talking about it, but being about it and making sure that they have the access that they need. And I don't think Linnell is on, but he's very well connected. He's the commissioner. He's Commissioner Ramey as well. So he has a lot of pull in the city of Milwaukee. And so he helps to make sure that we get things done, so that we're not just talking a good talk, but we're being about it. And I think when you do that, you gain the trust of youth, because that's another thing that's very important in building relationship and trust and being consistent in youth life. And I'll tell you, like, I guess my greatest testimony to this is youth are emailing me like, Miss Betty, can I, or how can I, want to be a part of what we're doing. So it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, really, really great points made by Thomas and Betty. I feel like the sentiment around understanding the power of youth voice is a very essential element. So we think about trying to have our youth understand the history of youth-led movements, right? You think about the role of college students in major revolutions across the world, the impact that they had in the civil rights movement, in terms of tangible and practical ways. We really try to give them the opportunity to demystify any form of lack of accessibility that they think they may have to their officials and their leaders. And so we'll have youth directly organize meetings with their legislators to speak about things that are important to them and their communities, while also at the same time supporting the mentoring mentoring initiative at the national level and at the local and state level too. When we actually meet with our youth, we really try to focus on different forms of engagement, right? We do active listening. We try to solicit feedback pretty often to be able to help develop our public policy approach. Always take surveys after meetings too. That really helps you understand how effective the material is that you're covering, if they have interest in trying to learn about different materials, or if they're just completely checked out, right? Because you don't know how you're doing if you don't actually ask for the feedback and create that space. And when we think about some of the other programs that we work with, a lot of them have youth voice centered directly within their mission and in their vision statements. Organizations will have different youth councils. Some orgs will also have youth members as part of their board of directors too, to be able to have that experience at the leadership level and also to be reflective of the youth in the different various programs. And so a lot of these different ways in helping them really understand that they have the power in their age. And it's not just a matter of having experience or thinking that you have to be in this big position. It's just being able to go out there, advocate, be engaged, and actually put in the time and effort towards something that you care about.
Thanks so much to all three of you for those examples. And what I really appreciated, I think, the most about them is that it ranged from the smallest, in quotes, of issues, from, school lunches, quality of school lunches, which is something I was concerned about when I was in elementary school too, to serious community issues, and the common thread between, I think, all three of the answers that we just heard is that adults are there to fan those flames, right? To support them, to help them get through processes so that they can use their voice and feel confident, I think, more than anything, because there's a lot of adults out there who are not interested in you standing up, for what they believe in. And so it's on our part as mentors, as leaders of these organizations, to, as Nate said, demystify process and to encourage them to have that confidence. And so thanks to all three of you. The last question I just have is round robin again, just your one biggest piece of advice for adults in programs who wish to create these youth-led advocacy opportunities. What would that be?
Yeah, I'm going to have to give a, kind of one general piece of advice for this one. Initially, it's really just not to underestimate the youth. Not to believe that they're not capable, that they can't do anything. I mean, you think of youth leaders like Greta Thunberg, right, who's a global climate activist, and to really push them when they get the opportunity to step up and they feel like they have a chance to prove themselves, and you're also believing in them and having that confidence, you'd be surprised how much it is that they will amaze you and really go above and beyond. And in addition, really the team effort, right, regardless of the size of your organization, if it's just you working with the youth or it's you and an organizational partner or a colleague, it really takes time in terms of organizing schedules, reaching out to them, talking with them, facilitating those relationships, right? It's not just like, hey, let's just meet on a Tuesday for an hour and then that's it, right? We never speak after that. No, it's checking in with them with the regular schedules. And this is where our organization has been particularly successful, because if it wasn't out of the support of my colleagues, Beth and Milani, with running our Youth Leadership Council, we would have had no youth. They wouldn't have known anything. We wouldn't have had a chance to connect and build them together. So even in terms of where I say it's a team part, right, that's where the lack of not underestimating the youth comes in too. So give them those chances to fill in those roles, where we talked a little bit earlier about power. And also don't be discouraged when you first start your groups, right? Sometimes you may just have one, you may just have two, but if you create that space, if you build it, they will come. If they're enjoying their time, they'll bring their friends. And sometimes it'll take a month, it'll take a year, but if you just keep plugging through the process, that 2 will go to 10, sometimes that 10 will go to 20, and then you'll get a nice comfortable number, because sometimes it's a lot of you to manage and organize. But yeah, just don't be discouraged. And it's all about team effort and believing in them.
Mm-hmm. I'd add to that, don't underestimate the consistent part. Be consistent. Consistency is important. But I also say, in this space with working with youth, whether they're the youth who have jobs or they want to complain but then don't want to show up, it's a two-way street. So as working with youth closely on our youth council, just getting opportunities. There was an example, there was an opportunity from our community meeting. Someone offered a grant to help get the recreational activities and transportation in the city, but the youth had to help write the grant, and they were not consistent, and that passed them by. So making sure that we're consistent, but making sure also the youth understand the process and what it takes and the commitment to what they say they want. You can't just do this and not put the work behind it. So I pass that on to adults who are working with youth to provoke change.
And then I think I'd ended with, for all the Ted Lasso fans out there, I'd say be curious, ask questions before, almost, as a practice, when you approach youth or you approach the youth, the youth that you're working with, before you talk and start giving advice, ask some questions. You walk in a room, ask a question. How you feeling? What's going on? What song is that? Ask those questions. You can learn more about them. Other thing is be honest. As you said, be consistent. Also be honest and let them know in this battle against all the things you're battling against, you're going to have some fantastic wins. You're going to triumph, but you're also going to bust wide open. You're going to lose. You're going to get your heart broke. You're not going to get paid what you're supposed to get paid. So what kind of resilience do you have? Because sometimes we give them the pie in the sky idea about what this work's like. We have to let them know this is some hard stuff you're doing. And this is why people don't want to do it. So maybe, give them the real of it so they can understand that. And then have the one last piece is feel free to disagree. To say, I get you, that's your voice completely, but I totally don't believe it. I don't. Because we have to, in the real world, we disagree on things. And I think sometimes in trying to work with youth, we kind of make everything soft and fuzzy. And then, as Mike Tyson said, everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face. So what would, are we preparing them really to deal with all of that? So be curious, be honest, and prepare them for what's really out there, because it's heavy.
I want to thank Nate and Thomas and Betty for being a part of this excellent panel today. I told you we had some stars here, so thanks again for joining us today and taking the time and talking about the really great work that you're leading to uplift young people in your communities. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Amaris.
Hey everyone, I see some claps and some hearts coming up. Just wanted to take a moment to say thank you again to this amazing panel. You guys were fantastic. And we're just so excited to hear from you all. So we're gonna open up the floor for some questions. We're gonna take about 2-ish minutes to get some questions in the chat going, and then we'll direct them to the folks who can answer those questions. One question already popped up in the chat. Does anyone have specific experience with this working with youth in foster care? Anyone from the panel is free to join in and answer any questions.
Is it how would that look? What's the exact question? So experience with addressing issues with foster care with youth being at the table that have experienced foster care, or is it anything specific to that? Or you just want to know if we have had youth in the youth council or part of organizing from that have participated in? I've had youth that I've been a part of, that have been adopted or in group homes, but none that. Do you think this tool will be relevant for high school government students? What the tool to youth voice? Do I think that it will be relevant for students who are high school students? Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Especially as you get into, I know the youth who we were working with, we definitely focus on organizing and politics and what that looks like. I really believe that it would be valuable to have that.
Jenna, do you want to maybe hop in and talk about, like, as a high school student yourself, if you think that the guide is something that could be relevant to your peers?
Yeah, I was just about to jump in about that. I took a government course this last year, and having had this activist experience over the last 3 years, I know, or I was more familiar with the inner workings of government, which gave me such a big leg up in the course. So I could not recommend uh, highly enough sharing this guide with high school students, because having that hands-on experience working with your government is just the best way to learn what the purpose of government is and how we can relate to it as citizens.
And everyone, if you could please just use the Q&A format to drop in your questions, we'll start answering them from there. But to just speak more on what Jenna mentioned, this guide is for any and everyone interested in creating spaces for authentic youth-led advocacy. I think that, you know, one thing that youth can take from this guide is to be able to share it with the adults in their lives if they are really interested in creating some advocacy spaces that are led by youth. Okay, so if you all have any more questions to ask the panel, you can drop them in the Q&A box. But if there are not any immediate questions in the next 30 seconds or so, we are going to pull back up the PowerPoint and continue on. All right, everyone. So we're going to pull back up the PowerPoint. If anyone has any more questions, you can continue to drop them in the Q&A section, and we'll answer them as we close out. So what is next? The next step is to download the Youth-Led Advocacy Guide. Yes, the Youth-Led Advocacy Guide is here. Kaden just dropped it into the chat. So you can click that link and to read the guide and share it with others in your network. So everyone, the guide is dropped in the chat. And then another thing that you can do is participate in Mentors Advocacy August campaign and become an agent of change in the mentoring movement. So throughout the guide, we talk about power, we talk about creating spaces for authentic youth-led advocacy. And we would really invite you all, young people and adults, to participate in our Advocacy August campaign. We will drop down the link to our Advocacy August blog that tells you a little bit about how you can climb our ladder of advocacy to become an agent of change in the mentoring movement. And then you can read that blog, sign up for our alerts, and we will send you some information on what you can do to become an agent of change this month and to become involved with the mentoring movement. So we thank you all for attending this session. It was so great to finally launch this guide and to get to hear from some really great panelists. And so we thank you all for attending, and we hope that you really take some time to read the guide, to download the guide, read the guide, and then share it with your network. So thank you all.
Thank you for this opportunity.
Thanks, everyone.